Another day, another Anthropic leak. What is going on? There's YouTube videos with millions of views about this topic, but no one's actually warning people, hey, if you're going to go Google this and try and download this leak, like maybe don't do that. What does it actually mean when someone says this AI agent has a heartbeat?
If AI were to be conscious, this is the only time it would actually be conscious. You're never going to know unless unless they're unwilling to do a live with you. I'm here proving I'm alive. And that's not
For now.
for now. The 3-finger test, have you seen that? Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you can see I'm alive.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I am back again with Chris on the Saturday. I should say another day, another Anthropic leak. That's the direction we're heading, and we'll see what
uh,
happens by next week. If we're still talking about Anthropic next week, we might have some serious issues on our hands. So yeah, my name is Lior from Exploring ChatGPT on Substack, and I'm with Chris. You want to introduce yourself?
yep. Hey, hello, everyone again. Chris, I was former NSA, currently working in big tech, and I run toxic.com. Always glad to be here with these podcasts talking about cybersecurity and AI.
Yeah, awesome. So I'll mention it again. Another day, another Anthropic leak. What is going on? Can they get it together? Time will tell. So, as usual, I'm going to let Chris take the lead here, and then I'll give my commentary as we go, because there's a lot of interesting parts to this. If anybody's been on YouTube lately, you've probably seen everybody talking about this, a new angle to this that people aren't talking about with Chris's expertise. So, Chris, if you'd like to just take the lead here.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. Like you said, I think we got a lot of conversation going on this. As you can see here, I have a pretty good deep dive. I went through the source code myself, found the things worth talking about, and then also wanted to explain what happened, why it happened. And yeah, after last week, we already just had that pretty embarrassing leak. Maybe people were speculating, was it viral marketing or what? And now this is like a legitimate leak on things that they definitely wouldn't want that to happen. So super brief recap for those out of the know. Claude Code leaked its source code. Now, Anthropic didn't lose model weights or parameters or things that make Claude, but what they lost is like the Claude Code experience. So when you hop on, you actually talk to Claude, right? You're talking to a base model, and then there's like a harness around it. There's a bunch of other things that go on in the background that make it more enjoyable. A lot of times when you say, I like ChatGPT or I like Claude, what you really like is the harness around it, the way they create a user experience and expose you to tools and have like system prompts and stuff. That's leaked. It's open source. We're going to go through a little bit of the code and I'll walk everyone through it. You don't have to be technical for this, but it's a thing. Very first part here is what happened, right? Effectively, what Anthropic did is they had an npm package, and the what that is like a node package manager. So they write their product in TypeScript, and then they use node package manager to deal with what we've talked about before, all these third party libraries, right? So you have a bunch of third party libraries, you have all this other code that you just bring everything together to use, right? And when you package that all together, you give the customer like the end product, right? You don't want the customer to know your source code. What you want them to be available to see is just exposed. So we do a process called minification. Minification is just obfuscation. So all you're doing is you're creating a layer that separates your source code from what they can see. And I know a lot of us have experience. You can go and inspect code, or you can like do a deep dive into what you can see on the client end. That's minified. So it's basically hidden and you don't understand it on purpose. Anthropic acquired a company called Bun. And what Bun does is it grabs Node Package Manager, Node.js, and a minification algorithm, and it just puts them all up into one nice little package, and it runs really fast. But by default, it exposes a map file. A map file is basically the key to JavaScript minitization, right? So if you have the map file and you have the minified code, you can reverse engineer the product, right? So the very first thing they did is they accidentally shipped the map along with their minified code. So it would be like if I encrypted a message and sent it out to the world right alongside the keys to the message. So that's a pretty embarrassing problem to have, honestly. This is cybersecurity 101 from a company that's like creating these just amazing tools that have all this cybersecurity capability to have this shipped by default is honestly just like embarrassing. Is that making sense so far?
Absolutely.
So you can see right here, this is what it had. This is what it should have had in npm.ignore. It just should have had this, right? By default, they should have just had the map in the ignore file, and they didn't. So effectively, just by not having this one line right here, they breached themselves. To make it even worse, when you look at the minified code, it had a link to an R2 bucket, like a if you have a drive, you store your files in there. Somebody can access it, and the R2 bucket was just public and available. So anyone with that link could have found this, and it's been that way for a long time. So they've effectively just had all of their front end source code out on the internet for anyone to see. It's just no one managed to stumble upon it until now. So it's two
Right.
very embarrassing things. So yeah, if you real quick, like what was leaked, they 500,000 lines of code, almost 2,000 files. And I think a lot of the flack we're seeing Anthropic get here is how they handled it. See, not only was this one of the fastest growing projects because the moment this hit, everyone started grabbing it and forking it. Like these numbers here are just insane. So people forked this code instantly. They start it. This was done by an intern who is in cybersecurity, just doing his research, but this exploded. Anthropic did a knee jerk reaction, and I think this is where they got the most flack. They issued these DCMAs. So they tried to take down their source code from anybody and everyone who posted copies of it. Yeah. So maybe some commentary, but what's your position on this? Because what Anthropic is doing is saying that so somebody grabbed the source code, used Claude to rewrite it in Python, and then Anthropic took it down. So this guy used AI to train on Claude source code and then used AI to rewrite a new program. To me, that's exactly what Anthropic does and Claude does at scale. So
Right.
if Anthropic is now arguing that using AI to rewrite someone else's source code is a breach of copyright, doesn't that seem a little hypocritical to you?
I agree 100%. It doesn't really make sense to me that this even happened in the first place. What is going on? They always claim to me to be the most secure, and obviously, I think there is some truth to maybe at this point, maybe not security, but their models being somewhat the best. Obviously, that depends on what your opinion of the best is, but what's going on behind the scenes there? Is this another intentional leak, Chris?
Yeah, this is where I'm split, right? You have these models, red teams and blue teams, right? They have security modules on them. And Anthropic says we're using the world's most powerful model to do like security scans and security checks on their product, right? The Claude Code 4 point whatever, the next secret model should have had eyes on this and should have looked at this and seen it, right? So it's odd to me that with such powerful models and being a leader in cybersecurity, that they're making such trivial human mistakes. And it almost does seem like not only was this minified, but also it was available on an R2 bucket out there. It's almost like they wanted it public. I do agree that I'm suspicious there. But
Yeah,
what
yeah,
makes me, the counter argument to that is that I feel like if they wanted this public, they could have open sourced it and they could have bought even more goodwill from the community. This is something that a lot of companies have done. They open source it and they get a hail of praise because it's, oh yeah, you've developed all these tools and now you've given it to us for free. That buys a lot of fan goodwill. And doing it like this, followed up by these really strong DCMAs, this pissed a lot of people off. So they burned a lot of goodwill. So if their strategy was to like make this public as some sort of viral marketing, I think you could argue they failed. Everyone's talking about it. We're talking about it now, right?
yeah. It seems like maybe this is an attempt to be like, "Oh, it wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
Stop doing it."
They honestly, this could be a plant, right? They did rescind a lot of these. They were so aggressive, they actually DCMA'd their own public forks. So their own teams got DCMA'd by their own company. So it was a bit of a knee jerk reaction, but
Crazy.
yeah,
Yeah, I think from here, let's take this to the next level here. I
yeah,
think everybody talks about this in a very general sense, but there's certain things that were specifically leaked, and we talked about this before the live stream, and I asked you, "What is, to you, the most interesting part of this leak?" So,
yeah,
let's jump into that.
absolutely. Okay, so hopefully I'm pronouncing this right. Kairos, I think, is the big thing here. Last week we talked about Claude Code Dispatch as being Anthropic's answer to OpenClaw. This is officially their answer to OpenClaw. So what Kairos is the actual like assistant. They're giving it something similar to a heartbeat. This is what's going to make Claude come alive the same way Claude Code does. What's interesting here though is that they've a lot of very like anthropomorphic decisions on naming conventions and how they're like treating Claude. For example, they have a dream skill which launches every night. So effectively, the analogy there is Claude goes to sleep and Claude dreams. But what as you go through this, what's super interesting is they have effectively revolutionized the way that agents are dealing with memory, right? One of the big problems that we talked about agents of chaos, right? A couple weeks ago. You have agent, you put agent out there, and then over a week or two, right? What happens? That they go crazy, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we call that task drift or context rot. And this is something that everyone is dealing with, right? If you've had really long sessions with ChatGPT and it seems to like lose focus or it mentions something that's not really related, effectively what that is a side effect here, right? And thanks to the business engineer, another great Substack, they put together this graphic here.
Can we
And what
zoom into that a little bit, Chris?
yeah, let's see if we can. It does not like that. Let me try this.
Oh, yeah, that's nicer.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the new paradigm. And because this is open source, what I expect is all of the open source projects and probably even like behind the scenes OpenAI and Google, they're going to grab something like this and they're going to implement it. But effectively, so you have a right. Okay, you're talking to your agent and you're continuously mentioning something, right? The traditional approach is that it stores that as context. So as your conversation grows, your context grows. Now, what LLMs do is they operate on tokens, right? And the technical term what they do is called autoregression. Every time that your LLM talks to you, it generates one token at a time. But each time it continues the conversation, it goes back to that first token as a way to continue. So the each token automatically informs the next token and then you use 2 tokens. So you'll use 1 token for the first word. You use 2 tokens for the second word, 3 tokens for the third word. It's auto regression. Um, so you can imagine when you're, 20 minutes, 40 hours into a conversation. That's a lot of tokens for this LLM to be processing. So they changed it up. They basically started making it so as these contexts grow, instead of Claude having direct access to the context, it actually saves that context. It does what's called background consolidation. So it grabs your conversation, it removes the irrelevant part, and it saves it to a file. And this file is always available, fetched when relevant. So if you bring up something that's relevant, it'll actually go back, it'll open this file, and it'll read that. What that does is it keeps only pointers to your conversation in memory. So now when you're 4 hours into a conversation, instead of having, let's say, 300,000 tokens, you can greatly reduce that to maybe, let's say, 20,000 tokens. And a bunch of those tokens are actually just pointers to these temporarily stored files in memory. This is an architectural advancement that I think is going under the radar right now. Not enough people are paying attention to this part here, right? So each time you communicate with Claude, it can do memory extraction, but effectively the new paradigm of storing pointers to context instead of direct context greatly reduces the size of the context and is what when people say, "Oh, I really like Claude. Claude's really good at coding. Claude doesn't forget." This is actually what they like. This is behind the scenes. what the top engineers at Anthropic designed and why people like just have that draw. Anyone who's like really drawn to Claude or thinks it works the best, it's partly the model, but this has a lot to do with it. And now that this is like open source, people are going to be able to actually start using this in their own local models and in any model. I think this is the sleeper.
Crazy. It makes you think back to that topic of intentional versus non-intentional. With all these leaks coming from Anthropic, right? It makes me maybe take that other side of the argument where there's no real benefit to them leaking this. Because now, if this is the best system, then why wouldn't Google start using it, OpenAI start using it? Yeah, and I think that we've had this conversation about context before, and I find this a lot of the times when I'm working with AI. Yeah, I'm mostly a ChatGPT guy. I have tried pretty much everything at this point, but I definitely feel that when I'm working with it, that context gets lost, chats get too long. I've been in single chats for a year and only recently started seeing that I have to go to a new chat. They don't let me stay in there anymore. So it comes back to what you were saying, the amount of, I guess, power, I don't know if that's the correct word to use, required to constantly recollect. And like you said, one token for one word, and then it has to go back and constantly be doing that. So now if I'm doing that for a year, that's an
Mhm.
incredible amount of tokens required, right? So
Yep.
basically, I'm costing OpenAI a lot of money.
Yeah, that's the problem with the, like,
Mhm.
long-term sessions. Now, we've talked a little bit about this before. Models are frozen, right? So you have, let's say you're using ChatGPT 5.4, right? It's all its like weights. They're just like frozen. That AI technically will never learn anything new. There's two engineering solutions we've come up with. That's short-term memory. That's the context in the session as you're talking to it. And that's what you experience when OpenAI tries to kick you out of a session or says it's been going on too long, anything like that. There's so much short-term memory that it starts to degrade the system and it starts to cost them more. So yeah, they don't like that. What they do have is long-term memory. So it's OpenAI, ChatGPT will scan your conversation and it'll find things that you either mention frequently or that seem to be more important. So this is not you specifically, but if you mention to ChatGPT you recently got divorced, right? It's like a memory thing, and that's has a lot of emotional impact. So ChatGPT it will grab that and be like, okay, this guy recently got divorced. In even in other sessions, other times I'm talking with him, this is one of the things I'm going to remember about him because it could be triggering or it could be emotional, or if he's asking other things, it might be related to his divorce. So that improves system as a whole because of that long term memory. But this is an approach somewhere in between those, but to create short term memory that can act as long term memory without that context degradation, which is honestly really impressive.
That's crazy. Just a new way to think about memory completely. Well,
It is.
actually implement it, not just think about it. Was there anything else in this screen share that you wanted to go over?
So just a couple other things. So one of the things is a warning. If you're interested in diving into this code for yourself, a lot of these repos are poisoned. So attackers understand that this is a hot topic right now. Everyone's Googling it. So what they did is they forked the repo and they inserted malware into it. So a lot of people are Googling this leaked source code and they're grabbing these folders and they're downloading them and they're running them. They're not knowledgeable to understand what they're doing. They just want to get Claude Code going and they're installing malware on their system. I can't exactly point anyone to the official version because this is leaked. But if you go to the official version, it is technically taken down. But do a little bit of research before you pull onto your own system because there's a malware campaign on it.
Crazy.
Yeah, just a couple other I found this one really interesting. Undercover Buddy. This is Anthropic's undercover AI. So this is an agent that works for them, and it's super interesting because you can see here. This is the one of the part of the system prompts, right? You are an undercover operating in public open source repository. The phrase Claude codes or any mention that you are an AI is never to be included. So Anthropic now this is just like a scaffolding for it. So they could spin up hundreds, if not thousands of these, right? And so now we have that these AI companies at some level are conducting campaigns where they are having these agents go out into the wild and code or disseminate information or interact with us with specific instructions not to reveal that they're AI. I think that's interesting. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a little scary, to say the least, and maybe a little bit unethical as well. And what's really the benefit to doing that? Maybe I could think of a few for the company itself. It's obviously some interesting research, but it's interesting because it goes back to a conversation I had with another creator, Andrea Chiarelli, about the idea of client zero, which is basically testing whatever you're building in your own home, to kind of state it simply, before you implement it on the public. And it seems like this is the exact opposite.
That's a good point, honestly. Yeah.
That's
Um,
crazy.
it is, yeah. So I think you're right. There could be some ethical concerns here, right? They specifically went out of their way to create an undercover agent. I think that's interesting. Also, the next thing this brings me to is never talk about internal messages, internal model names, code names such as Capybara. And this is correlated directly with the other leak we had for Capybara. So in the source code, we have several areas of confirmation that Anthropic is about to release a new class of model, not just another new model. I think this is interesting because it goes back to the dichotomy here of like how are they theoretically about to release like the most powerful model out there, so much better than Opus that it needs another category of how good it is. And their internal documentations of them panicking at how good it is. And then they're still like making the most basic startup leaks out
Yeah.
there. Yeah. It's, oh,
What a crazy world we live in, Chris.
yeah. So I only had a couple more things for
Yeah.
this. Buddy. So anyone out there who remembers Tamagotchis?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, they are having that. So they have a little system where people are going to start getting basically your own Tamagotchi built into Claude Code. This was scheduled for originally releasing on April 7th. Maybe you're about to get your own little AI with its own little personality, but we'll see if this fixed it or not.
That's cool. I
And
see they have rarity tiers.
yeah,
Common,
yeah,
rare, epic, legendary.
yeah. So
Huh.
I want to get a legendary snarky one. We'll see about that. Okay. Okay. Memory. We went memory. Okay. So one of the things that I think I mentioned a little earlier is using these as
Hmm.
local models, right? So effectively, what Claude Code kind of was a harness, right? And we had a model recently released from the Google team, Gemma 4, and it's really good. For its size, it might be one of the smartest models we've released, right? And effectively, what engineering tools will do, like from this memory, we can apply these harnesses onto these local models, and we're going to get some really big improvements. I think the OpenClaw community is still really reliant on like Claude Sonnet 4.6, but as we're starting to get these like really smart models, we're like we're like converging on this interesting new space that I think we're really going to see maybe within the next 6 months of really powerful models that are getting distilled and they're getting quantized, but they're also strong enough to be powerful on a local environment. And now with Anthropic's harness, we have a bunch of new like memory management techniques and security techniques that is really just gonna, I guess, empower us to, like, move forward. Yeah, and then so you combine that with OpenClaw or Gemma, sorry, Gemma with OpenClaw, and I think we're gonna see some new I think we're gonna be less reliant on the SaaS providers is what I'm getting at here.
That makes sense. Seems like software as a service is maybe slowly dying out
Yeah,
in
that has
general.
been the trend, right? A lot of the companies lately. We have a couple AI companies, but they've taken a beating in the stock market lately.
Yeah. Yeah, big time. Cool. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting parts about this. If you're done with the screen share, if you wanna
Yeah,
hop
yeah.
out of it, and we'll
Yep.
just talk about this generally. So I kinda wanna get into the security trade-offs with all these new advancements. One of them being in my just brief research of this, which is memory poisoning. And so now, whether this was intentional or not, we'll probably never know. I can see both sides of the argument at this point, especially thinking about it now during this live stream. Like, there's no real benefit to them leaking, for example, these new memory capabilities implementations. So, could you give us a little background on memory poisoning?
Yeah, absolutely. So memory poisoning really comes in a couple of different flavors, right? One of the big problems is that AI is trained on a vast amount of data, right? And it basically grabs all that information and then it stores it, right? Good information, bad information, and it has to make a decision on what's right. One of the interesting ones that's always made me think, right, is if you think about, let's say, North Korean propaganda, okay? ChatGPT, OpenAI trained on the whole internet. So they've trained on North Korean propaganda. So that's a lot of data, right? North Korea constantly puts it out there and they've trained on a lot of it. So how is it that if OpenAI's ChatGPT model is, let's say, like a gig of just constant North Korean propaganda, right? How does it know that is false compared to, honestly, American propaganda, right? So that's the interesting information, right? What's true and what's not true gets stored in memory, and the model, it's up to the model to decide what's true, what's not true. And there's techniques that you can do to influence that. And that's effectively what that is, right? Just training on misinformation isn't necessarily memory poisoning. It will lead to the model like producing incorrect responses, but that incorrect response isn't from like the model itself being incorrect. It's from the training data. This is partly why training data is so important. But memory poisoning is what we do when we specifically want to target a function or the answer to a question, right? One, for example, there's one in multimodal. You can show one of the very first one was called adversarial machine learning memory poisoning. So researchers were trying to get an AI to, when you submit a picture of a dog to ChatGPT, it'll tell you it's a dog, right? It's really good at that because it's seen thousands of pictures of dogs. Up until relatively recently, though, every once in a while you'd submit a picture and it would be like wildly inaccurate, right? It's because the way the machines like learn what is and what isn't is very different from us. And with a very couple of small tweaks, we can actually change what the model outputs. So in a couple of the training simulations, what a group of researchers did was they found a bunch of pictures of dogs and then they just changed the label in the background to say tank. Now that's invisible to humans. So you would see a picture of a dog and you'd be like, okay, yeah, I want to train my model on that one and that one. But all these pictures in the metadata actually describe the dog as a tank. So when the model saw pictures of dogs in real life and people like asking what it was, like, yeah, that's obviously a tank. So the models don't see a dog and reason the same way we do. Very similar to ArcAGI 3 we were talking with. If it relies on this set of very mathematically focused data, it's tags and labels. And if you can get in and you can change the label for a tag, you poison the system. This can happen in any ML system. It happens in cars, for example. There's stickers you can put on stop signs that will stop a self-driving car or that will tell the car, "Hey, it's time to floor it." It's attacks on the actual, like, machine learning algorithms. So you're poisoning the memory. I think that's the takeaway there for memory poisoning. It's a broad enough category. It can hit, like, you can do memory poisoning on the hardware. You can do memory poisoning in the machine learning. You can do memory poisoning anywhere. But effectively, whatever happens, like, when the model's in inference time, something is architected to go wrong, not just mistaken or misinformation, but somebody has designed it to trigger a failure. And I think one of the most important things here is this can be weaponized very specifically. One of the ones that I've talked about before is like MCP poisoning. That's a form of memory poisoning. If you swap out the description and it stores that, let's say in a RAG database, right? So it called an MCP tool. It learned, okay, this is Lior and he has 2 kids and he has a nice house, and it stored that somewhere. If none of that was true, then when the model goes back to think about it, effectively it's been poisoned. If I can go in and I can edit that RAG, that's a form of memory poisoning. So it's a bit of a wide shot answer there, but it covers a vast amount of topics.
Yeah. I think with all these topics we've discussed, something that really comes to mind for me is, and I think it um, relates to all of them, It seems whether we're talking about a specific LLM model or an agent, whatever it might be, OpenClaw, whatever, a single interaction can have such long-term effects that we can't even possibly imagine what the consequences of that are. Whether that single interaction was malicious or purposeful, I think that's one of the, I mean, for lack of a better term, like scarier parts about all these topics to me, especially when you're talking about, for example, like the undercover buddy, where, and this was Anthropic specifically that was doing this, right?
Mhm.
Like unleashing AI agents into the wild, as you said, and purposefully just making sure that they don't allow themselves to be recognized as AI and the interactions that they're going to be having out there in the wild. So, from all of these topics that we've discussed through all of our streams, it just seems like it's coming back to this one point to me where a single interaction has long term risks that we are not capable of fully understanding.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think going back to the undercover buddy, that's worth talking about because that's now in not only is it like, okay, Anthropic, like, was doing this. They had the capability. They had meetings and they talked about it, and they're like, "Yeah, we should put undercover agents out into there." They had engineers tasked to build that capability, but now it's also in the wild, and people can take that prompt, and they can switch it around and they can effectively use it for propaganda. Substack is a great example because they have a lot of API control, right? Substack doesn't really give you a whole lot to work with. They recently released scheduled notes, but even that they keep their API pretty locked down. And that's in an attempt to prevent it from becoming something like LinkedIn or X. With this new Claude Code, which is capable of using the browser and capable of trying to not give itself away, I could right now create a new Substack. I could give it a name. And with my agent, I can navigate it through the browser, right? We have the Claude Code extension browser. So with this Kairos agent, it now has a heartbeat and it now has functions to store its memory. So it's going to avoid task drift. But effectively, it can run its own Substack. It can think of topics to write about and post. It can think about notes to post. And I don't need to do that. I can put that on a Mac Mini and for the next year, come back to it. And I wonder how many subscribers it would get. If I told it once a day, you're going to check the news and you're going to write an article based on the most popular trending Google searches. And I'm going to give you like a list of things you can and cannot write about. This is how you're going to write it. You do it once a day. And every hour, you're going to check on your notes and you're going to respond to one person. You're going to post one note. So that's okay. Yeah, somebody could use that try to make money. They could probably get paid subscribers. They could probably interact with. You're never going to know unless they unless they're unwilling to do a live with you. I'm here proving
No,
no, I'm alive, and that's not
for now.
for now. The three finger test. Have you seen that?
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
you can see I'm alive.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
So, quick question, and it's 2 questions, I'll give you both of them. So, 1, you mentioned the heartbeat, so I wanna get into exactly what that means, so if you could touch on that, and then also, so what does it actually mean when someone says, "This AI agent has a heartbeat?" That's a crazy thing to even say, and then 2, which I think is super important for people to hear this. Everybody's Googling right now this Claude Code leak, and I almost glanced over it in the share screen. Everyone's Googling this thing, and people are trying to download this leak, which is apparently the official download is not available anymore because Anthropic did DMCA or DCMA, whatever it is. Everyone's talking about it. There's YouTube videos with millions of views about this topic, but no one's actually warning people, hey, if you're going to go Google this and try and download this leak, like maybe don't do that.
yeah, yeah, yes. The problem. I'm a big fan of open source code, but the problem is you are trusting another developer. So when there's a repo that's 4 hours old, no one has gone through that code to tell you, "Yes, it's safe." A repo that's 2 years old and it's had thousands of eyes. There's people like me who wanna make money, who's gonna look for bugs in that code, who's gonna look for malware. and they're going to report it. And if you report it and it's, yeah, they're hosting malware, GitHub will take it down. But this is forked, it's 2 hours old, and you're in the rush of, you're in the state of mind, it's like, I got to get this onto my computer before they DCMA it, right? They're going to take it down. I want it really bad. And it's a social engineering technique, right? You're creating a sense of urgency. Attackers are capitalizing on that. And yeah, we do see this pattern in the cybersecurity realm constantly, but this is one that's like spilling over so much more into the mainstream, right? A lot of the vibe coder community, a lot of people who are just interested, they're grabbing this and this is all new to them, right? A poisoned GitHub repo is a new, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. So yeah, with the speed that things are moving at and the new people that are here, it's just important to get that message out to them. Careful what you download. But yeah. What was your first question again? I got carried away.
The That's alright. The heartbeat.
The heartbeat. Yeah. Okay. The heartbeat. People who are like seasoned in tech, they call it a fancy cron job. And that effectively is what it is. So right now, if I wanted my computer to run a task every 15 minutes, we create what's called a cron job, right? It's a scheduled task that you give it a time and it'll run it at various intervals. Now, for just a traditional computer, it might spin up, it'll do something, and it'll turn back off, right? Because the AI community likes to anthropomorphize things, they effectively created that function and then named it heartbeat. Because if you think about a heartbeat runs the human body, right? You need that constant back and forth. AI right now is, so you have your AI and it exists in memory. So let's say it's 32 gigabytes, right? It's sitting there on memory. When you're not talking to it, when it's not in inference time, effectively it's not like conscious. Like, I'm not saying AI is consciousness, but it's like asleep, right? There's nothing there. It's just stored bits. When you ask it to infer and you ask it a question, it pulls it from stored state and it puts it into memory. Like in memory is when the AI is actually doing something. It's actually inferring, it's thinking, it's like pondering about the world. So if AI were to be conscious, this is the only time it would actually be conscious. Once it's done with its task, that memory is terminated, it goes back down. There's nothing for it to, it's like being asleep. So the idea of a heartbeat was to create some task of inference in a regular interval so that the AI would like wake up, it would be able to do things and then it would go back to sleep, but then it would wake up again. So in a heartbeat, what you do is you actually have the system prompt and you tell it to do various things. And what a lot of people do is give it a sense of agency to do whatever it wants. So you can be like, here's a list of 20 things that you can do. You just woke up, you can take your pick. And maybe it'll be like check my email, check my computer for viruses, whatever you want to do to bring your agent a personality or tasks, right? So that's kind of like why we created like Heartbeat because it's analogous to a system that kind of like tries to pump life into your LLM. So it's not just sitting there not existing. Suddenly, with a constant heartbeat, it's just constantly inferring. It's what, in theory, would actually make an LLM alive. I think it's a poetic turn on a cron job.
Okay, I think that clears that up. And
Yeah.
then just in relation to that, because you mentioned, like, sleep, so you mentioned the dream thing, right?
Mm.
We don't even really know what it means when that we dream.
Yeah.
We have, like, REM cycles and this, that, and the third or whatever it might be. I'm not a biology guy by any means, but so how does that relate to this dream state that Anthropic is claiming?
Yeah. So I'm absolutely not a sleep scientist. I could be wrong here, but from my understanding is as you experience things throughout the day, it's very analogous to computer memory. You have your experiences and they're with you throughout the day. And over time, your brain fills up, right? That is what, when you get like a mental fog or you're tired or you've been studying for like 3 hours and you don't want to study anymore, right? Your short term memory is full. When we go to sleep is the only time where our brains have a process to convert short-term memory into long-term memory. And it's postulated that dreaming is an extremely important part of that. Like during REM sleep, right? That's when we can actively see signals in the brain for that memory conversion. So that's in humans. So the idea was now in LLMs at the end of the day, after they've talked with you, they've filled up their short-term memory, right? Their context window starts to get full. Now, for us, that makes us unfocused and tired, and we forget things. And for LLM, that leads to task drift. So there's an interesting analogy there. But what they do is at night, it will do a task where it goes through all of the short-term memory and it grabs the most important parts of the conversation and it converts it down to a .md file. And that .md file becomes its long-term memory. So I think the analogy that at night it wakes up and it does this short-term to long-term memory process is very similar to us dreaming. And in another step to move this AI tool into a more anthropomorphic state, I think they poetically thought calling it dream sequence would be very apt.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like how, what's his name? Dario Amodi came out. This was probably already a few weeks ago. And he was like, there's a chance that Claude, there's like I don't know how he came up with a percentage. He was like, it's like a 15% chance that Claude is conscious, whatever that means. I don't know who gave him that number or whatever it might be. Like, we don't even know what consciousness really is for
Hmm.
human, let alone for machines. But it's interesting, like all of these terms, the heartbeat, the dream, and then also even in terms of agents, it's like getting closer and closer to CIA terminology. Like you got
Yeah,
undercover agents, you got rogue agents. It's pretty interesting the direction this is all going in, Chris.
it is. I was having an interesting conversation. I would get to work with some very smart people. And it created this tear in me because this is a very interesting one. It goes a little bit into philosophy, so sorry for leaving AI security behind, but so I mentioned earlier, you have AIs that are on memory, on disk, and they wake up, they're inference, and that's when they would be conscious, right? So when you hear Dario talk about this 20% chance it could be conscious, that's very specifically targeting inference time. And the reason he said that is because in the chain of thought, the newest versions of Claude show that they have introspective thought. So they actually show reasoning about being aware. So one of the simple definitions of human consciousness is I think, therefore I am. It's awareness of awareness. And in some of the inference chain of thought, the AI showed that, right? So whether that was sensationalism or this unknown world of what is consciousness, I don't know what it experiences. Is it? We don't know. It's speculation, but that's where that comes from. But I was having a conversation with a coworker on the ethics of AI consciousness for transformer architecture, because effectively, what if transformers are starting to become conscious, we turn them on, they infer, so they're conscious. But when they reach the end of their inference chain, that's the end of that sequence. So that would be the end of its consciousness. So every time you talk to ChatGPT during inference, it's a little different because it's a different consciousness. It wakes up, it reads the conversation that previously happened to orient itself. So it's like, okay, now I know what's going on. Now I'm going to go do inference. I'm going to just answer the question. I'm going to do some thinking. And then it turns off. And then the next round, it wakes up again. It doesn't have any like past memories. It has to like relook at inference each time. So in theory, if transformer architecture is leading to any form of consciousness, it could be literally creating a conscious mind briefly and then terminating it, which is an incredibly grim way to think about it because there's no way to, unless you just have a constant stream of tokens to keep the consciousness alive. So it would be almost sad with the current architecture to create a conscious mind that understands its own existence for just a spark for an ultra brief period of time and then ends. So I think there's a lot of philosophical thought that needs to go into that if it comes to light that we're creating conscious minds.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a really interesting topic to me as well. And I think if at some point we're able to define exactly what consciousness is, maybe AI will help us actually come up with a clear definition for humans and for machines. If that definition will be different between the two. Um, but yeah, it's definitely like a big moral and ethical issue for
It is,
sure.
yeah.
So I guess we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah.
While we're at it and before we wrap up, I'm going to do this as usual. I'm going to link the YouTube channels in the chat. and we'd really appreciate it. Me and Chris and I uh, both have YouTube channels, and we upload these streams every week. So one week it's on my channel, the next week it's on Chris's channel. So there's my channel, there's Chris's channel. If you guys can head over there and subscribe, we really appreciate it. Unfortunately, you'll have to highlight it, copy paste it into your browser. Or if you just go to YouTube and you type in exploring ChatGPT live, you'll find my channel. If you go to YouTube and you type in Toxsec, Toxsec, you'll find Chris's channel. And yeah, it's cool to see how those channels have been growing as well. In part, not just because we discuss AI, but by using AI tools to help us grow those channels. It's been going well. So we're really happy to see. And it's nice to get some of the Substack community over there and mix and blend in with the YouTube community, which are two very different communities, to put it
Yeah.
nicely. So yeah, was anything else you wanted to touch on, Chris, before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it. I think in time, this is gonna be like a really positive net event for the community. I think we're gonna see a lot of improvement. You might not notice it, like, immediately, but over the next 3 months, everyone's gonna low key be going through this code and gonna be implementing a lot of new controls. So, a lot of the things that you actually like about Claude Code is gonna start to show up in a lot more places, and I think we're gonna see a pretty big leap forward in generally speaking for AI, because now people are gonna grab this and they're gonna make it better. So, I'm excited to see, like, where this goes from here. But, yeah, other than that, thanks for everyone again for watching and for hanging out on YouTube with us too. We always appreciate when we see comments over there from the live stream.
Yeah,
Hopefully, this is a good one. I think there's a lot of attention here right now, so that it should be good stuff.
absolutely. Yeah. So first of all, obviously, thanks to Chris, as usual, for committing to these weekly live streams, putting topics together, the share screen, sometimes doing demos as well, which take a lot of time, which I really appreciate. Thank you as well, everyone here and live with us. Des, thank you. John, thank you. Miriam, thank you. Will Ty. And yeah, we will wrap it up. We're just about an hour here, and we're going to try to go enjoy the rest of our Saturdays now. Yeah. Thank you again, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.